What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. It is Tuesday, August 29th. My name is Ewan, and on today's episode, we're going to get into some F1 fantasy with an Italian Grand Prix preview. We are going to Monza this weekend. I am wearing this rather hideous or beautiful, depending on what you think of it, yellow Ferrari shirt that they wore last year at Monza for the 75th anniversary. So will that bring good luck for the Tifosi? We will see. Vibes were not great in the Netherlands for Ferrari, but let's see if they can pick it up in their home race of the 2023 F1 fantasy season. Quick plugs here at the top. You can like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube or Spotify, Apple. Been putting them out on podcast form as well. And you can follow me on Twitter here at YouIn or YouOut. Any likes, comments, much appreciated. But that will be the last of that plug. Let's get right into today's episode. New layout here. Just going to see how this goes in the top right. Hopefully it works out. But yeah, we are going to get into the review, fantasy standings, driver of the week, price changes, Italian Grand Prix preview with the weekend schedule, weather. I'm going to revisit the Aston Martin versus McLaren debate, see how that is looking after a couple of more races of information, and then discuss some transfers and the upcoming races. Lots to get into, not a lot of time to get into it, so let's just go right ahead. Dutch Grand Prix was wet and wild and a lot of fun. Alex Albon had a great weekend, qualified 4th, finished 8th, still one of the drives of the day, even though he lost 4 places. Like, very impressive from the Thai driver there. Max Verstappen kind of doing what Max Verstappen does and only wins. Fernando Alonso had a spirited race here. 2nd, Pierre Gasly got a podium, and 3rd after a 5-second Sergio Perez penalty. Carlos Sainz in 5th, so Sainz were okay for Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton, strong drive, some strategy failures from Mercedes cost him. Lando Norris came in 7th. Alex Albon highlighted there in 8th. Oscar Piastri in 9th, and Esteban Ocon in 10th. Charles Leclerc, Zhou Guanyu, and Logan Sargent all DNF. George Russell did not finish the race as well, but he did it after the 90% mark. After Zhou Guanyu brought out the red flags, he was on 88% of the race. So tough luck if you ran Zhou Guanyu last weekend. But also there in the qualifying, you can see Logan Sargent, first Q3 performance of the year. Good job by Williams, but Sargent crashed twice on the weekend. And things are not looking great for the American. Dutch Grand Prix facts and stats. The optimal team here from these are from f1fantasytools.com. Fantastic website. Highly suggest you go over there if you are looking for some more data on F1 fantasy. Optimal team was Red Bull, Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso with the DRS boost, Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, and Esteban Ocon. Positions gained, Gasly with 9, overtakes Ocon with 19 because it was insane in Zandvoort. Gasly, Alonso, Sainz, and Norris also had 15. I'm pretty sure, I should have looked this up before, but I'm pretty sure that's more than Carlos Sainz has had all season in the overtakes department. Fastest pit stop, Red Bull with 15 and McLaren with 3. Driver fantasy points here ordered by points per race for the whole season. Just comparing everything. Verstappen with 46 points, Perez 30, Hamilton 29. Standout performance here, Fernando Alonso with 62. George Russell coming in with a tough 6 points. Carlos Sainz, 31. Lando Norris, 25. Charles Leclerc with a DNF, a -7. He is now down to 10.3 points per race in the last 3, and he's been worth 0.30 points per million over the last 3 as well. So tough going for the Ferrari driver there. Pierre Gasly with 39 and Lance Stroll with 10. That's a big thing for me because this week I did activate my final fix chip on Alexander Albon. After his great qualifying, I was like, okay, I'm going to take my 7 points and run. And I put in Lance Stroll, which if I'm doing a silver linings thing, I would say that I had the right idea. I just picked the wrong driver because I should have gone with Pierre Gasly. 39 points, that would have been a massive swing. But I am up to 5,500 in the world now, so making strides after being 8,300 last week. But Final Fix may have jumped the gun there. Felt it on Saturday afternoon after the qualifying. I was like, that seems like too good to be true for Williams. They still came through. I think it was a wash, actually, because Albon ended up with 17 points, as we can see right here. Stroll came in with 10 on Sunday, so ended up not losing any points, but not gaining any points. So after the chip strategy thing last week, I was like, I only have a few races to use these chips. Like, seems like a good time. So right strategy, just wrong driver, unfortunately for me. But that is kind of how we want to look at playing our Final Fix chip this year. Like, driver from the backfield qualifies high, especially a driver like Albon, whose price is within range of a Stroll, a Gasly, an Ocon, a Piastri, if they qualify poorly. So definitely keep that in your thoughts for the future. Didn't work out for me. Hopefully it works out for you, though. Piastri came in here with 18 points on the weekend. Ocon with 26. Sonoda 16. Zhou Guanyu with minus 12. Tough for him as he barely missed that 90% threshold, like I talked about earlier. Albon, Bottas, Hulkenberg all coming in here. But Liam Lawson, 19 points, replaced Daniel Ricciardo after Ricciardo broke his wrist in practice on Friday, avoiding Oscar Piastri. So Lawson came in and did really well, finished the race, got some overtakes, got some positions gained. He will be driving for AlphaTauri in Monza this weekend. So certainly something to think about. He's now 5 million. He had a 0.5 increase. I was talking on Twitter on Saturday morning with Tom, who has a great YouTube channel as well on F1 Fantasy. And he was saying that he might go Lawson. I was like, well, it didn't work with Ricciardo. Is it going to work with Lawson? I feel kind of bad. Hopefully he did go Lawson. Haven't checked his team yet this week, but it did work for him. I thought Ricciardo would have a better chance of getting driver of the day, that sort of stuff with public sentiment. But Lawson just did it on the track. It didn't even need the public swaying the driver of the day. And then Logan Sargent down there with negative 16. Constructors, not a ton to go off of here. McLaren with 56, Aston Martin 67, so a good swing for them back in that kind of midfield battle. Mercedes with 40, Red Bull with their classic 101, AlphaTauri with 40, Alpine with 66 as well, so good job by them this weekend. Driver of the day was Alonso. Fernando Alonso qualified 5th, second place in the race, gained 3 positions, 15 overtakes, 62 fantasy points. His 62 points are now the highest non-Red Bull score of the season. So he tops the best of the rest here with his points. Massive amount of overtakes, just fantastic race for the Spaniard. Even was thinking about a sneaky little dive in turn 1 after the red flag rolling restart. But that's his 7th podium of the season. That's tied for second most with Sergio Perez. And he trails that one guy, Max Verstappen, for podiums. Lots of price changes this week. 16 drivers went up in price and 2 went down. So just looking at them here, Max Verstappen went up 0.1, Lewis Hamilton 0.1, Sergio Perez 0.3, Carlos Sainz went up 0.3, Lando Norris 0.5, Fernando Alonso went up 1.5. So he's now 13.4 million. Let me just switch over here to this other side. Yeah, so Lando Norris now 14.9, Fernando Alonso 13.4. So definitely something to consider in our budgets moving forward. Esteban Ocon is 11.2. Lance Stroll is now up 500,000 to 10.1. Pierre Gasly jumped up 1 million. Oscar Piastri jumped up 500,000. Alexander Albon jumped up 500,000. He's now 8.4 million, as is Valtteri Bottas. Not sure why that is, although Valtteri Bottas is in 17% of teams, while Alex Albon is only in 14%. So if you are not paying attention, I would definitely make that swap this week, as Williams should do quite well at Monza. K-Mag went up 500,000, Yuki Tsunoda went up 500,000, Liam Lawson went up 500,000, and Nico Hulkenberg went up 500,000. So now Logan Sargent is the cheapest driver in our squads with 4.5 million price tag, which, much to my chagrin, leaves me 0.1 short of what I would like to do this week with the transfers. And the drivers that fell in price, Charles Leclerc fell 0.2. He's now 22.1 million, and George Russell is there at 19.2 million after a 0.2 price drop. For the constructors, there were 7 price increases. Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Alpine all went up. McLaren and Alpine both went up 0.5 million. Aston Martin went up 1 million, AlphaTauri went up 0.5, and Haas went up 0.5. So Aston Martin is now 11 million compared to McLaren's 12.3 and Alpine's 11.3. Moving on to the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, 5.793 kilometers, 53 laps, 11 corners, 2 DRS zones. Been around for a boatload of time. The first Grand Prix was in 1950. It is flat out speed at Monza. So those cars that have the great straight line speed should do well here. Williams being touted very heavily favorites. If you remember last year, 2022, a certain South African driver, Nick de Vries, came in after Alex Albon was sick and got 9th place and pretty much earned himself a place on the grid this year. It didn't last long, but that's when Nick de Vries really shined in Monza last year. Charles Leclerc highlighted him here, mostly because this might be the last time I remember seeing Charles Leclerc smile in a Ferrari uniform. So just wanted to remember this point in time where he got pole. He looks happy. He's pointing to Ferrari. He was asked this weekend after his DNF about re-signing with Ferrari. He said he was committed to winning a championship with Ferrari. And the journalist afterwards was like, but you have not re-signed yet? And he was like, nope, have not re-signed yet. So things are still up in the air for Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen won this race last year under a safety car, rolled through the last 2 laps, was a little bit disappointing after a pretty entertaining race. So hopefully we don't end on a safety car this year. Grand Prix preview with the schedule: free practice, regular Grand Prix schedule, practice 1, practice 2 on Friday, practice 3 on Saturday. Qualifying is going to be same time as it was in the Netherlands here, 4 p.m. local time, 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern time. So make sure you get those lineups in before those lock. Weather, it's going to be dry. We're going to have a dry Grand Prix weekend. That is very exciting. So we're going to get some actual data that we can use on Friday and Saturday morning before qualifying, as there's been a lot of wet races around the European circuit this summer. So it's very exciting that we should have some dry weather. We can really tell who's going right or who's going strong, who's kind of struggling right now at Monza. So definitely looking forward to that. So always wait for at least after Friday's practices to kind of make any of your moves. Preferably Saturday right before qualifying in case there's any crashes, any breaking news, if a certain driver breaks their wrist, that way you can know that. And also I find it really handy on Friday nights to go on Formula1.com and just kind of look at the Friday debrief, what we learned in practice. They have some great data, some great quotes from the team, definitely stuff that we should use in our F1 fantasy teams. Let's get into the one debate I want to talk about quickly. We don't have a ton of time between races this week, so let's get into it. Aston Martin versus McLaren, just kind of checking in on this again here. So Alonso, 13.4 million, Norris, 14.9. Over the last 3 races, Fernando is actually outscoring Norris, 23.7 to 23. Definitely helps when you score 62 points in one race, but you score what you score. Alonso is worth 2 points per million over the last 3 races, while Lando is 1.67. And Fernando's best race was 62 in the Netherlands this last weekend, and Norris was 29 at Hungary right before the summer break. Here we go. Stroll versus Piastri, 10.1 versus 9.5. Stroll's outperforming him 10.3 points per race over the last 3 to Oscar Piastri's 9.7, but Piastri is still more valuable over the last 3 races at 1.13. Piastri with 18 points in Hungary and the Netherlands compared to 12 points for Stroll in Belgium. Right there. And then versus the constructors here, it's 11 million for Aston Martin, 12.3 for McLaren, 37.33 points per race over the last 3 for Aston Martin versus 45.33 for McLaren. So the constructor is going strong there. Aston Martin's worth 3.83 points per million over the last 3 compared to McLaren's 3.97. And Aston Martin had 67 points in the Netherlands and McLaren had 62 in Hungary. So really not a ton of difference between any of these assets here. What we are going to do now is I am going to share my screen. We're going to look at some possible transfers this week. Let's get right in there. Just make sure it doesn't look awful. Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, that's fine. So we're going to scroll down here. Alonso doing all right this year. So this is what I ran last weekend. Max Verstappen 2 times. Lando, Alexander Albon, Oscar Piastri, Fernando with McLaren. So I got rid of Sergio Perez. Don't know how great I feel about that this week, especially with it being dry. Red Bull should be fairly strong at this track, as should Williams. So I don't want to get rid of Alexander Albon either. So it's really these kind of 3 assets here. So I've got 2 free transfers. I'm not going to get rid of McLaren. I'm not going to get rid of Red Bull, as I still think these 2 are the best constructors, despite what I just showed you in that last slide, where Aston Martin is okay in the value for money game. But so let's say I take out I take out Lando and Mr. Alonso here. So I can do Sergio Perez, and that leaves me with 10.8. I can go double Red Bull or double Aston Martin again. I can get Gasly in, who had a strong performance. Not too keen on that. Another option here is actually I could let's see how we do this. So I could go Lando. I can go Fernando, and that's going to leave me 12.4, which kind of leaves me in the same predicament again. Esteban, Lance, Pierre. Piastri just makes too much sense there as the 3rd asset. Got 2.9 here with Alex. Could get in almost anyone in the next tier up with Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, as you can see. But I really think Williams are going to do quite well at this race. They did well last year. They've kind of shown their straight line speed at other tracks this year that are similar to Monza. So it's kind of tough. I could also go here, go down to a back marker. And then, I mean, that would definitely be enough to get me all the way up to Sergio. Double Williams? I don't know. Yeah, so lots of options here. Don't feel great about getting away from... Oh, I will show you what's actually the most frustrating is... here we go. So I got there. 4.3. Nico Hulkenberg, if you had just crashed last week, I could have been running the much-wanted triple Red Bull, triple McLaren. Nico, why did you have to go up? Why? Why did you do this to me? But that is... So I think, obviously, we're waiting for practices and stuff. I like where my team was this week. I do like having Alexander Albon, so that leaves me with a decision here. Do I run Perez again? Do I risk it one more week? Or do I think it comes down to kind of Perez versus Lando, and then kind of like I can get some Aston Martin exposure. I would prefer it to be Fernando, obviously, but that is kind of where my thoughts are. It's kind of coming down to Lando versus Sergio. So let's stop sharing that. Let's go back here. Oh, now there's nothing on the screen. So there we go. Boom. Upcoming races here. Singapore Grand Prix. Got another doubleheader in a couple of weeks with Singapore and Japan back-to-back. And then the next race after that will be Qatar. So yeah, that pretty much does it for this races episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. I hope that was helpful. The transfers are going to be tricky. Definitely watching free practices, so keep your eye on that on Friday, all day Friday and Saturday morning before lineups lock. Definitely check out that article on Formula1.com. Definitely go to F1FantasyTools.com. They have some fantastic information there. That's where I get a lot of my info for these videos. So shout outs to them. Follow me on Twitter at YouInYouOut. Like and subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. Almost at 75 subscribers. So we're growing. We're growing here, guys. But always appreciate any views, likes, and suggestions for future videos. As there's still a few races to go in the season, we can still do a lot trying to crack top 5K this weekend. I don't think there's any need to play a chip, especially with no rain, no sprint race. So that's the last tidbit I will say there. But once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.